it has before it today, may I take it that the Assembly wishes to consider Agenda Item 29 directly in the plenary meeting and proceed immediately to its consideration. I hear no objection. It is so decided. The General Assembly will now resume its consideration of Agenda Item 29 to take action on the draft resolution issued as document A/76/L40. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Nigeria on behalf of the African states to introduce draft resolution A/76/L40.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I have the honor to introduce this draft resolution addressing the situation of widows on behalf of a group of African states. Let me begin by thanking all colleagues for their support, constructive engagements, and flexibility during the negotiations. It was such an interesting experience. Permit me to share some insights and perspectives on the issue of widowhood and the rationale for the resolution. The practice of harmful widowhood rites and rituals is one of the complex problems that women, not only in Africa, but also in some other developing countries, contend with at present. Depending on the social status of a widow at the time of her husband's death, a newly widowed woman may become economically vulnerable and suffer undue hardship. Most harmful widowhood practices are essentially another aspect of violence against women. These harmful practices are rooted in cultural and traditional practices, as well as the socialization processes that subject women to passivity and dependence. This resolution, therefore, acknowledges the additional harm and human rights violations that may result based on a woman being widowed and seeks to mainstream the vulnerabilities and marginalization within the UN system. To do so, the resolution recalls existing international obligations which member states have committed to upholding by outlining the rights violations suffered by widows, such as disinheritance, harmful traditional practices, and discrimination, and the effects they have on widows. As we speak, many countries across the globe continue to contend with and recover from insecurity, conflict, and now COVID-19 pandemic, making this resolution incredibly timely. As a result, we have a growing number of widows at risk of human rights violations due to beliefs around gender inequality that prevent them from the full enjoyment of their human rights. In this regard, this resolution seeks to concretize and expand upon the commitments made in Resolution S/RES/65/189, which recognizes 23rd June as International Widows' Day. This resolution aims to provide member states with specific and actionable steps to draw awareness to, mainstream, legitimize, and protect the rights of widows within the United Nations system and at home. The adoption of Resolution 65/189 in 2011, notwithstanding, there has not been any coordinated effort to address the situation of widows, including the violations of their human rights. The lack of information on the situation of widows compelled the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres to call for quality data disaggregated by age, sex, and disability to ensure that widows are counted and supported now and in the future. In light of the COVID-19 pandemic, it is imperative that widows receive the attention of the international community in order to address their specific situations. This, Excellencies, is a step in closing the gap in our collective understanding of progress towards our goal of gender equality, empowerment of women, and the achievement of the 2030 agenda, and to include a group routinely left on the margins of development programming. Excellencies, The African group is conscious of the fact that many of these issues were previously unknown to most of you, and we are grateful for your openness and constructive engagement on the issue during the informal consultations. In conclusion, our efforts at gender equality and women empowerment will be woefully wanting if we do not address the situation of widows, especially in harmful widowhood practices, such as the grave violations of their human rights, disinheritance, institutional discrimination that limits their ability to access justice, decent work, and social protections. I would like to thank UN Women and Global Funds for Widows for their support and collaboration. Their support and encouragement throughout the process are highly appreciated. Let me therefore thank immensely those delegations that have co-sponsored this resolution and to call on those who are here to do so to kindly co-sponsor the resolution now before the adoption. Yesterday, the section of the Commission on the Status of Women, CSW, opened with pomp and pageantry. Women from all over the world gathered here in New York to add their voices once again to the promotion and advancement of gender equality at the point of women. The adoption of this resolution today, by consensus, will ultimately be a fitting tribute and the best gift we can all give to our women. Let us fight against bias, discrimination, and stereotypes. As diverse as we may look, let us work for an inclusive and equitable society. Let us stand up for our women by taking action for gender equality and women empowerment so that we can collectively eradicate and end all harmful widowhood practices. Let me therefore invite delegations to support this resolution by joining consensus. I thank you all.
I thank the distinguished representative of Nigeria. The Assembly will now take action on draft resolution A/76/L40 entitled Addressing the Situation of Widows. For your information, the draft resolution has closed for e-sponsorship. I now give the floor to the representative of the Secretariat.
Thank you, Mr. President. I should like to announce that since the submission of the draft resolution, and in addition to the delegations listed on the L document, the following countries have also become co-sponsors of L40: Brazil, China, India, Maldives, Pakistan, Thailand, Trinidad and Tobago, and the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. If any other countries wish to co-sponsor A/76/L40, please signify by pressing the microphone button now. Angola, Bangladesh, Burundi, and that concludes the list. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the Secretariat. May I take it that the Assembly wishes to adopt draft resolution A/76/L40? It is so decided. Before giving the floor for explanations of vote after the vote, may I remind delegations that explanations of vote are limited to 10 minutes and should be made by delegations from their seats. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mr. President, the Islamic Republic of Iran is dedicated to removing the barriers that impede the full enjoyment of women's and girls' human rights, particularly women in vulnerable situations, including widows. The empowerment of the women and girls, particularly widows, holds significant weight within the priority list of the economic, legislative, and political agenda of the Islamic Republic of Iran. In this regard, several programs adopted by the government address women's rights amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, inter alia through the provision of the healthcare and financial assistance packages, such as the cash transfers or relief loans to women heads of the households, including women's home-based business launched by the females head of the households received the government support during the pandemic as well. With regard to the draft resolution just adopted on addressing the situation of the widows, we would like to further clarify that Islamic Republic of Iran only recognizes and takes into consideration the provision of the aforementioned resolution in accordance with not only its national priorities, regulation, legislation, and policies, but also the Islamic principles, instruction, and teaching, as well as religious norms, traditions, and values of the Iranian society. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran. We have heard the last speaker in explanations of vote after the vote. We will now hear statements after the adoption of the resolution. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sierra Leone.
Distinguished delegates, Sierra Leone aligns itself with the statement delivered by Nigeria on behalf of the African group and adds the following remarks in our national capacity. Sierra Leone expresses profound gratitude to the African group for embracing this initiative when it was first introduced to the group in July 2021. It is gratifying to mention that since that time, our engagement on this issue have been positive and constructive. Sierra Leone has been a torchbearer for this issue, and we will continue to stand steadfastly with the many torchbearers as well as all those joining consensus on this groundbreaking resolution. As Sierra Leone commemorates over 2 decades of the end of our civil war, we regrettably note that the decade-long conflict, the Ebola epidemic in 2014-2015, and now COVID-19 pandemic resulted in an unaccountable number of widows. The adoption of the resolution therefore presents the opportunity for global solidarity and cooperation to address the plight of widows. My delegation, based on its interaction with the Global Fund for Widows, acknowledges that one major concern on this issue had been the unavailability of accurate data. This lack of information, if not addressed after the adoption of this resolution today, will prevent us, the international community, from adequately addressing the unique needs and human rights challenges widows face in sustainable development programming, policy making, and, of course, human rights and gender equality. The resolution therefore calls for collective efforts to leave no one behind, envisioning widows as powerful actors in our communities and countries. Let me conclude, Mr. President, by stating that with this resolution today, we are reaffirming shared values and commitment towards a more gender-equal world, addressing critical gaps in policy and practice to achieving gender equality and SDGs, particularly on the plight of widows, reaffirming our promise to leave no one behind. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Sierra Leone. Now I give the floor to the observer of the observer state of the Holy See.
Mr. President, the Holy See congratulates the African group on the adoption of the draft resolution addressing the situation of widows. My delegation expresses its gratitude to the facilitator, Mr. Nandi Nze of the Permanent Mission of Nigeria, for his efforts in leading the negotiations. The Holy See welcomes a number of positive elements in the final text that will help address the situation of widows. These include condemnation of violence against women and harmful practices, including those which affect widows in particular, as well as their children. Recognition of the important role of the family and family-oriented policies to promote inclusion and support widows and their children. Acknowledgement of the need for social protection, particularly for widows who experience isolation and exclusion. Calls to eliminate legal discrimination and other barriers, particularly with regard to property and inheritance rights, and to ensure financial security for widows. Efforts to ensure the specific needs of widows are considered in the implementation of existing relevant global commitments. While grateful for these positive aspects, The Holy See finds it unfortunate that the resolution includes ambiguous terminology related to health, discrimination, and exclusion, as well as pregnancy. The Holy See is obliged to make two reservations on the adopted text. These reiterate those presented by the Holy See at the Fourth World Conference on Women and the International Conference on Population and Development, all of which remain valid and in force. The Holy See interprets the term sexual and reproductive health, sexual and reproductive healthcare services, health services, and related terms as applying to a holistic concept of health. We do not consider abortion, access to abortion, or access to abortifacients as a dimension of these terms. The term gender is understood by the Holy See as grounded in biological sexual identity, male or female. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished observer of the Observer State of the Holy See. We have heard the last speaker for this item. May I take it that it is the wish of the Assembly to conclude its consideration of Agenda Item 29? It is so decided. The General Assembly will resume its consideration of Agenda Item 15, entitled Integrated and Coordinated Implementation of and Follow-up